Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Let the filibustering begin.
Welcome to Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to Filibuster here on the Nerd Party Network. I'm Lee Hutchison and joining me as ever is Dallas King. Dallas, how are you?
Feeling old. Time flies, doesn't it? Well, not as old. Well, actually, I do feel old because, time marches on. It's already halfway through the year. And, I felt very, very old this weekend when I went to see Minions. Minions 2, The Rise of Gru, because I'd actually just been to a celebratory meal. So I was in a blazer, shirt and tie, but it turns out I was not the only one.
Yeah, it's become the big thing really of the past few days. I found myself, I don't have TikTok, so I've randomly just watched them on Twitter.
I'm too old for that, too old for TikTok.
I saw a YouTube compilation where I'm sure people that are listening to this have probably seen it, where young, predominantly men, are kind of dressing up in suits and going along to see Minions 2 as if it's some sort of big kind of Hollywood premiere. They're sitting there clasping their fingers together as if they're doing a Mr. Burns impressive, and in some cases some people are bringing bananas and throwing them at the screen and mimicking along, and I think you described it incredibly well the other day. It's is this Gen Z's version of The Room?
Yeah, no, I mean, last week I'd seen a couple of videos on Twitter shared from TikTok of, I think it was the first one where it's this sort of teenage boy who's dressed up in a suit, and the wait is over. They've been waiting 5 years for this. Obviously it was delayed due to COVID, so time to get back to the cinema. And then there's 20 of these teenage boys going up the escalator, all in suits and ties and stuff, and sitting watching the movie and, applauding at the end and stuff. And I thought that was I thought that must be an American thing. Turns out it was not. There was a few kids at my screening on Saturday. There was an almighty roar and cheer when the BBFC logo came up. It was this is their Avengers Endgame or something, I thought. And it seems to have got slightly out of hand over the weekend, I think it's fair to say. And that, it's all about the gram, it's all about the TikTok, it's all about the social media hits. There's no point in just turning up in your suit. You've got to film yourself turning up in the suit. And there's been reports of kids, with their films on, taking photos, videos during the screening, getting rather overexcited, fights, mosh pits at the front of the screen, leading to the point where, poor cinemas have now had to refund families with screaming children because, they're unable to watch the film in peace. They've had to put up signs saying that unaccompanied children in suits will not be admitted. They were doing bag checks to check for bananas and stuff like this. It all seems to have got slightly out of hand, but hey, it's getting people back to the cinema. Huge box office numbers over the weekend, slightly impacted, I think, by the amount of refunds in some cities. But yeah, it's probably the most surprising film story I think we've had this year since, well, technically about 2 weeks ago when Top Gun Maverick, of all films, became the first film of this year to gross over $1 billion. 4 weeks ago, it was Tom Cruise has never had a film opening over $100 million in the box office weekend. Now this is his first $1 billion entry, and I have to say, it's well deserved. Who would have thought it? This year is just not turning out how I expected.
No, so it's we're at that halfway point of the year, and it's always a good chance to reflect on what we've seen so far and what we're excited for in the near future. So, we'll kind of talk about sort of what our top 5 films of the year are. Obviously, I find myself in a bit of a predicament. I don't think it's been a vintage year so far, and I find myself handicapped by pretty much all of the best films of the year are films I saw last year and rated, subsequently last year as well. So
okay, so
films
what criteria are you using? Because my list may change depending. Is it films we have watched this year or films released this year?
films released this year. So one of mine has not got a UK release date yet, but I'm going to count that in mine. But for me, a lot of the best films of the year, Licorice Pizza, Red Rocket, Pleasure, The Souvenir Part 2, many others, they are all off the books for me, unfortunately. There are some incredible films, a couple of 5 out of 5s there, some really underrated and underseen films there as well. So yeah, unfortunately I've not been able to include them as I counted them last year. So we'll put it to you, Dallas, if you've scribbled down your changes. What have you kind of picked as your highlights of the year so far?
Well, at number 5, it's The Batman, directed by Matt Reeves. Did we need another Batman movie? Of course we didn't. Did I enjoy the hell out of a Batman movie directed by Matt Reeves, starring A24 poster boy Robert Pattinson? I absolutely did. For me, it set the bar very high in terms of potential blockbusters for this year. However, it may have been outdone by another one. I really enjoyed The Killing of Kenneth Chamberlain. This is a film which I watched earlier in the year as part of the Independent Spirit Award catch-up, and just an incredible sort of piece of filmmaking, all sort of set basically on two sides of an apartment door in New York. Frankie Faison plays Kenneth Chamberlain, based on a true story about a man who is dealing with some mental health issues and accidentally sets off his house alarm, which alerts the police, and they come to do a health check on him. He is very paranoid about the police, won't let them in, and then there's a standoff. And I think, even though it's based on a true story, even if it wasn't, I think most audiences will probably see where this is going to go. I mean, spoiler, the name's in the title. But it's just an incredibly sort of raw, incendiary piece of filmmaking. It's probably the tensest film I've watched since, I'm going to have to invoke that one, Uncut Gems. But just like, it took my breath away, that piece of filmmaking. I thought it was fantastic. Didn't really get a huge release over in the UK. It was kind of a digital release through Signature Entertainment, but I expect it will probably appear on like the likes of Prime and stuff very soon. So very worth checking out if you can. For me, Top Gun Maverick, absolutely sensational piece of summer blockbuster filmmaking. Again, was it a film that we needed? No, but it was legacy sequel done right for me. And for me, one film which, actually am I going to include that one? No, I think it's still my biggest surprise. So I think I'm going to include that one a little bit later. It would probably actually be Licorice Pizza. Actually, yeah, I didn't include it last year, so I'm going to include Licorice Pizza. Screw the age gap. I enjoyed it, and it's the film apart from Top Gun Maverick which I have seen the most, because I saw it at the press day. Went with my wife to see it on the 2nd of January. We always like to go see a film on the 2nd of January because there's not much else happening at that time. And then I also managed to see it on 35mm in Glasgow. I will always, if the film is available on 35mm and I can see it, I will normally see it. And yeah, I think the 35mm for me just greatly enhanced the experience. It took me back to that time, even though I was never born at that time, but it took me back then. And number 1 for me, the best multiverse movie of the year, Everything Everywhere All at Once. It was another film which I watched, and I just knew that I was watching something incredibly special. And, I could wax lyrical about it just now, but thankfully we have an entire episode of the A24 podcast where you can listen to my views on that one. What about yourself?
For me, yeah, it's definitely not been an overly vintage year so far.
There was only 3 films I think that I've seen that I gave 5 stars to. Quite a few 4s, but yeah, it was quite a lot of these films that I've mentioned now make it towards the end of the year. It's difficult to see.
Yeah, it's probably the same for me. Coming in probably at number 5 for me is The Northman. After having quite a bit of fear about sort of how this film was going to turn out, Robert Eggers goes sort of mainstream, I guess. You watch that film and you don't really sort of see perhaps much of the, I think it was Universal and Focus that were the big team behind it, but you don't really see their fingerprints over the film. You watch that and you go, that is Robert Eggers on a budget, and I want to see more Robert Eggers on a budget. I want to see more of these kind of auteur filmmakers given the budgets to do whatever the hell they want. I don't really care if big studios like Paramount, Universal, Fox, or whoever lose money. It's like, it's not my money, I want to see these people make brave films and exciting films. And The Northman was a highly enjoyable Friday morning at 10 a.m. movie, and one I'm really keen to see again. Number 4 would be Jackass 4. I had such a riot with this at the cinema. It was probably one of my most anticipated movies of the year, whereas most people were like rewatching Star Wars movies to get hyped for Obi-Wan Kenobi. I was rewatching all the Jackass movies and the 0.5 versions, then checking out Jackass 4.5, and it was just one of those ones. It was worth the wait. I had such a good laugh in the cinema, and it's probably going to be the film of this year that I'll end up watching the most. At 3, I would have gone with Zero Fucks Given. So this one dropped on Mubi, and it was all about sort of like an airline hostess just balancing that job and career and how difficult it can be for a low budget airline. I think, obviously you see the issues that have happened on the airlines over the past kind of few months. It's a very underpaid, underthanked kind of job, and this film really highlights the challenges for people working in that industry. At number 2, I've gone with Everything Everywhere All at Once. So again, one we really dived into on the A24 project, but one I really enjoyed. I'm a huge fan of science fiction, but I find it so hard to find original, unique, good sci-fi movies, and ones that really have a heart at the heart of the story that they're trying to tell. Everything Everywhere All at Once has that, and one I've seen a couple of times now, and I've just really enjoyed being able to go on that adventure and looking at that and going, on the opposite side of The Northman, a small budget, but where you watch it and you see, 2 filmmakers and you go, wow, they really managed to pull something off there. You look at, we spoke about it before, where you have Doctor Strange that has cost all this insane amount of money and it just looks like a computer game, whereas Everything Everywhere All at Once just looks like really great practical effects, a lot of in-camera work, and has a fantastic performance at the heart of it in Michelle Yeoh. But for me, my number 1 film of the year, one I caught very early on, unfortunately it was just a Sundance screener streamed to my TV, but one I'm excited to talk about and see at the Edinburgh Film Festival in a few weeks' time, and that's After Yang, the
Excellent list, and After Yang was indeed the film which I removed at the last minute because it's technically going to have a minor cinematic release in the 20th of September because it's was being distributed by Sky Cinema. Sky Cinema, which is a bit of an oxymoron because most of the films don't actually go to the cinema. But hey, there we go. And yet Jackass 4, that was probably... It was one of the 2 or 3 options which I was going to replace in there with, and I'd have to say Jackass 4.5, which is on Netflix. Zach Sushi, for me, is one of the greatest. I was laughing so hard at this, but also I had just eaten my lunch and I was finding it very difficult not to throw up during that moment. It was, if you haven't seen it yet, go watch it. I mean, it's just like, oh, I'm nearly gagging at the thought of it again.
So what have been kind of some of the disappointments of the year for you so far?
This was the easier list to write, I think. I mean, it's always bad. I feel bad sometimes about, naming and shaming my worst films of the year. Nobody sets out to make a bad film. Well, not intentionally anyway, but sometimes it happens. There was one film which I saw at the Glasgow Film Festival, which is one of the worst films I've seen in a long time. I'm still not going to name or shame because it was a first feature and stuff like that. But anyone who knows our particular group will probably be able to figure out which one it was. But I'd say there's probably 2 films from Hollywood which had no right being as bad as they were. One, there was a lot of studio interference. I think they just didn't really know what to do with it, and that is Morbius. I only saw it the once. Sadly, we never got a reissue here in the UK. But for me, I think the biggest disappointment would have to be Jurassic World Dominion, which as we discussed on the episode where we reviewed it, this is a film which was setting up, humans versus dinosaurs. How are they going to be able to coexist? Are we going to have massive fights? This is going to be set all over the world, and it turned out to be about, dinosaur hybrid locusts. And once again, it was set in a park, and it was like, how do you manage to screw that up so badly? I have no idea. And yeah, no, for me, they were my greatest disappointment.
Yeah, for me, I also share the Jurassic World one. I mean, it's such a tap in to make a movie about dinosaurs. For me, and it's one I really did admire and really thought had some incredible scenes at some points, but just overall just didn't work for me, and that was Memoria. I know it's currently still trekking through America on its never-ending tour, and I think it's out on Blu-ray here next month, but it was a movie that I was really interested in, and I've never forgot the ending. There's an incredible scene with like a sound mixing board that I thought was a real standout, but it was just a film that I'd maybe had a little too much hype for going in, and just unfortunately left me a little bit disappointed. But it's one I'm not going to forget about, unlike Morbius and Jurassic World, where I'm going to remember them for all the worst reasons. For something like this, it just unfortunately left me kind of feeling just a little bit disappointed.
Yeah, no, that's one which I missed, sadly. I think it might have had a couple of screenings up here, but I'd sort of heard that the sound mixing in particular was incredible, and it's one which probably would have benefited from a big screen experience. So, I mean, I will have the chance to catch it on streaming or on Blu-ray or DVD, but I kind of wish that I would have had that big screen experience to take that in, and yeah, made my own opinion on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, what have been the surprise of the year for you? What's kind of caught you by surprise, I guess?
Well, apart from Gentle Minions, I think the biggest surprise for me was a film which I knew nothing about until it started to gain some traction on film Twitter. People were raving about this. And this was a film called RRR, a Bollywood film which got, I think, a very, very small theatrical release in the UK and then was basically on Netflix soon after that. And this was just so entertaining. Now, I normally prefer to watch foreign language film in the cinema where it's easier to concentrate. You're not distracted by anything else going on in your house. You got your phone, your laptop, and whatever. But I was completely sucked in for like the 3-hour runtime of this. It's the story of like two men who are potentially going to be enemies, but they become friends because they don't realize each other's true intentions. And then it's about them trying to save this girl who's been kidnapped by two evil bastards from the British Empire. And the British people, they're the bad guys. Yeah, of course they are. It's set during the sort of partition time in India and stuff like that. But it's got everything you want. It's got action. It's got Bollywood song and dance numbers. It's got a scene where there's an attack on the British Empire's sort of mansion, which involves a truck which flips over and the man jumps out complete with an entire menagerie of wild animals, including tigers, deer, wolves, and they all attack the British and stuff like that. It is just so over the top, but it's so infectiously entertaining. I had an absolute riot with it, and I can imagine it's the kind of thing which I wish I had seen on the big screen. I think Prince Charles might now be doing sort of individual screenings of it or something. I think it's the kind of thing which would play incredibly well with an audience. And it's the kind of film which could help Bollywood films sort of break out into the mainstream in the UK. I think it has the potential to. I mean, I know that certainly in my city, the Cineworld down at the beach does regular Bollywood screenings because there's an audience for sort of Telugu and sort of Hindi screenings but I think it's basically to that community. This is a film which could break out. It could be potentially the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon of Bollywood cinema for me. So yeah, biggest surprise, but a huge welcome surprise, and I can't wait to see what the director does next. I believe he's been dubbed the James Cameron of Bollywood, so I guess maybe he'll take over the Avatar sequels. Who knows?
Yeah, that could be certainly interesting. Yeah, it's one I've not got around to watching yet. I've heard so much high praise. I think yeah, it's got quite a lengthy runtime, so it's just been trying to find that time to get on board with that. So yeah, I definitely need to check that one out. For me, my choice is going to be a film that I didn't have sort of very high expectations for at all, and when I watched it, it became something that I suppose it was a surprise, and it's become something that's become a bit shorthand between me and some friends, and that's The Tinder Swindler. So it's about this guy that like takes women jet setting all over the world, and then he tells them that he's been involved in sort of like a kidnap attempt, and he needs to be sent money, but you know, it's all too good to be true, and he's actually just got one big con at the heart of it. And it's been a film that sort of like exploded this documentary where you're like, what were people thinking, to him now being potentially a next Hollywood star. He's going to have a film made about him. It's just absolutely ridiculous. So it's been one of those films that certainly left a strong impression about everyone involved, and then really what's to be said about sort of the industry afterwards.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed that one when it dropped. I mean, we can slag Netflix off all we want for their distribution strategies and how they will, champion some films and then some films will drop without no word whatsoever. But one thing that they do very well is their I can't believe what I am watching documentaries. And yeah, this was just another one in a long list of these. And yeah, no, my wife and I were just like, what? And it does spark that debate, because you do watch it and you go, how could anyone possibly fall for this? And then I guess I've never been in the situation, so I don't know. But I would like to think that I would be questioning things more, and I wouldn't have fallen for the Tinder Swindler and his schemes.
Yes, I would also hope I wouldn't fall for them as well. I think I saw a great meme at the time was like, do you know what? I'm so tight-fisted. If my friend asked me for money for a meal deal, I'd be like, oh, I don't know about that. So, I think there's certainly something to be said about all those involved. But yeah, it's certainly been a kind of mixed year. There's nothing that's just been standing out so far, but looking ahead, we've still got a few months left. We've got 6 months to salvage the year. What are you kind of looking forward to?
There's a few things. I'm very much looking forward to Olivia Wilde's Don't Worry Darling. Absolutely loved Booksmart, her directorial debut, but this is a completely different beast. Looks very much like a drama. Not entirely sure what the plot's going to be. It seems like Florence Pugh is a sort of 50s housewife who is sort of married to sort of Harry Styles, and he might or may not be working on like the Oppenheimer project, testing out nuclear devices in the desert in America. She seems to be having some mental health issues. Trailer looked very, very good. Florence Pugh, always fantastic. Interesting to see Harry Styles in a larger role. I thought, he had a small but impressive turn in Dunkirk, so very excited to see that. See how they run another one of these sort of ensemble murder mysteries, which people have potentially rather lazily dubbed Knives Out meets the Grand Budapest Hotel. But it's got Sam Rockwell and Saoirse Ronan investigating a murder mystery which takes place in a theatre during a troubled production. That ticks all my boxes for something that I would like to see. And I mean, I've got my accreditation confirmed now for Venice Film Festival. Nothing has been announced yet, but fingers crossed that if it is announced, it's on at a time that I would be able to see it, and that would be Damien Chazelle's Babylon. Not out technically in the UK until the 6th of January 2023, but I'm hoping I will be able to see it at Venice. So that's my ones. And I guess, we're just awaiting full lineups for the likes of the London Film Festival and Edinburgh Film Festival as well. So hopefully there's a few gems there. But it's quite thin on the ground in terms of releases. I noticed up until the end of the year, there's not a huge amount. I think it's going to be the indie stuff more than the sort of big blockbusters. I think we've almost got to kind of run out after that sort of post-pandemic, sort of post-lockdown, sort of we need to get everything back out in the cinemas, and now we're kind of treading water a bit until. I mean, I guess there's Avatar, but I mean, I'll go see it, but I'm not overly excited at this moment. Maybe I'll come out of it like Top Gun and be like, wow, I should have never doubted James Cameron, but there are other things which I would prefer to see at this point.
Yeah, I've got the same. The enthusiasm is kind of waning a little bit for the year ahead. But, you know, the one thing that kind of reassures me is like it is festival season soon. You know, we'll have Edinburgh, then we'll have year hype following Venice. There'll be Toronto. There'll be the London Film Festival. And it's got me really excited for like all these hidden gems that are going to come. And, you know, pretty much most of my favorite films of last year I got to see on sort of the festival circuit. So I'm really hoping that there'll be an opportunity to just like dive into all of these films and just, yeah, I'm just really hoping for, you know, hidden gems, surprises, things that I didn't anticipate. You know, I think that's going to be really exciting. So touch wood, you know, it's a good time ahead, but yeah, I'm just kind of lacking in the hype and suspense at the moment, but I'm sure something will come good, and you know, there'll be an interesting top 10 at the end of the year for me.
You didn't even mention Taika Waititi's Thor: Love and Thunder, which is out next week.
Oh yeah. Yeah, well, it comes out what, Thursday this week, and then I'm away in London for like 4 or 5 days, so I'm seeing it after work on the Monday. But usually I'd be like, you know, even though I'm in London, I'm going to go out of my way to try and see this one as soon as possible, whereas I'm like, you know, I'll see it on Monday, you know, just before I go see Octopussy as week 13 of the James Bond 60 years celebration of cinema. Yeah, exactly. So that'll be my fun and games for sure.
You know, I think you're right. I think it's going to be festival season will be the thing, and able to enjoy them in person again. Edinburgh will be in person, London in person. So yeah, I think that's where the fun and the excitement will be. We'll be finding out what people are enjoying, and then hastily rearranging your entire schedule to try and fit it in.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we'll kind of, hopefully you'll be able to chart our hype over the next coming weeks and months. So me and Dallas are both going to go and get ourselves accredited for Edinburgh Film Festival to keep the content mill running. Thanks everyone for listening, and I hope you have a good rest of the year. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.
Welcome to Nerd